Alright, is everybody ready to do this? You guys ready to go? Super start. So good. I've got to tell you real quick before we start, I've had the best time at this conference. Is this not like the best? I'll tell you what, I got rural ones, I go to school district ones, and this is just really well, in my opinion at least, really well put on, good topics, and you guys have been the best to hang out with. You guys have been a blast, so super excited to have you all in here. See, I didn't even have to say that. You're a captive audience and you're having some fun. We got some cool stuff coming up in this session. So this session is called Digital Instruction to Infinity and Beyond. When you saw To Infinity and Beyond on there, did you get kind of where I was probably going with that? Did anybody? All right, any of you willing to admit along with me that I am not a kid, but I still do love Toy Story? Lots of you. Okay, then you're in the right place. So I've got a little bit of Buzz Lightyear kind of inserted in throughout the whole thing. So we're going to be talking about how we can do instruction, how we can get kids connected with new information and get to practice with it and stuff, but do it a little bit differently. I'll get into more of that in a minute. But I do have this for you. So if you go to ditchthattextbook.com/infinity, that's the link for this presentation. So I've created a web page that has a bunch of resources related to this session that is right there. It's not going anywhere, so if you want to bookmark it, write it down or something, come back to it later, that's totally fine. It's not a secret link, so you can share it with people if you want to. But it's just got links to every single thing that we're going to talk about and then some. Sometimes I do this session longer and I talk about more things, and those are all on here too. So you'll get extra stuff on this page in addition to what we actually do here in person. So that's at ditchthattextbook.com/infinity. Okay, so here's the gist of it. Have you ever noticed how teacher-centered instruction is? It kind of feels like this sometimes, doesn't it? Whenever it's teacher-centered and the students are dependent on us, it kind of feels like this. It's like, let all of the children come to me, and I will answer all of their questions in the order that they were submitted. And it kind of gets overwhelming after a while, Anybody else in your mind hear the little aliens going, the claw? If you don't, you need to watch the movie. So yeah, it kind of feels like that sometimes, but it doesn't have to be that way. Whenever we make that switch from teacher-centered at the front, one to many, and we start to put that learning back in the hands of our students, that student-centered instruction, that's when things can get really good. Kids start to, kind of take control of their own learning. It's not something that's just done to them, but it's something that they have in their hands. And thankfully, there's lots of ways that we can integrate that into things that we already do. So I've got a handful of suggestions, ideas you can use in your classroom if you want to, starting with little things and then moving up to big things. And the stuff we're going to do in this session is also hands-on. So if you've got a device with you, feel free to grab that. I know for some of it, you could use even a cell phone. With others, it'll be better if you have like a laptop or a Chromebook or something. I'll specify when we get there. So, or always feel free to buddy up with somebody else if you want to. But we will be doing some hands-on stuff, which should be fun. So, okay, let's start with the first one. Quick question: how many of you use Google Classroom to manage assignments with students? I see hands. Okay. A little more than half, that's good. Do any of you use a different learning management system other than? Well, it meant that the students come in and the bell rings, and then it's time to start class, right? So for me, the students come in, they sit down, and I tell them, okay, we're gonna do this thing in class today. We're gonna do this, and then we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna do this, and then you turn it in. And if you've got extra time, make sure that you go do this, and make sure that you don't do this. Everybody got it? Okay, let's go. And inevitably, I get with all of those instructions, and somebody says, what? What are we doing? What are we supposed to? I wasn't paying attention. Can you say that again? And it's like, whoa! You're like, why? I just said it, And so what happens when that all transpires? What happens is that we end up burning the first few minutes of class, which happens to be the single moment when we have our students' most attention. We burn those moments going over instructions that they're going to end up asking us about again, right? And so if we've got a day like that, something as little and as simple as taking your instructions and putting them into an assignment or an announcement in Google Classroom or Canvas or Schoology, and putting all of that here in place, now all of a sudden they can go and they can read those instructions themselves. They're faster reading it than we are saying it. And here's the other thing I found with those instructions. I'll give kids instructions at the beginning of class, and then they'll ask me about them later, and I started to realize with some of those kids, it's not because they're not paying attention. Have you ever noticed that before? With some of them, it's not because they're not paying attention, it's because you gave them instructions on 5 parts of those things and they can't hold all of that in their brains. We can't hold all of that in our brains. So now they're able to go back and check on it every so often whenever they... Again, this is just a little tip before we really get in. If you do something like this, this magical thing starts to happen. And you actually end up creating, like conjuring out of thin air, extra instructional minutes. You ready for this? Here's how it's worked, at least for me. Whenever my students would come into my Spanish class, we had a cart of Chromebooks, and they knew that it was their job to walk over to the Chromebook cart, go in, grab a Chromebook, go to their desk, sit down, open it up, start it up, go to Google Classroom. Or Canvas or Schoology or whatever, right? They did that, get into that habit, and they start doing all of that, and their habit is to go check this stuff out. What are some of them going to do just out of habit? They're going to start working on some of this, like, right off. So you end up having them start to work before the bell rings, before class starts. You create magical instructional minutes that didn't exist before. Just a little thing. I know this isn't like groundbreaking, like mind-blowing, brand new stuff, but this is one of those little things that, can, when it adds up over time, you start to do it, weeks and weeks and weeks in a row, and you start to create some extra instructional minutes. Buzz Lightyear. What did you think of that first tip? Okay. Buzz is good with that. Thinks he can do that. I'm glad to hear that. Okay. Here's the next one. Remember, in this session, we're talking about ways to instruction. Instead of static, me standing at the front of the room, we can kind of transform all that a little bit. Can I see hands real quick? How many of you are familiar with Pear Deck? Hands up. Good. Hands down. How many of you are familiar with Nearpod? Very similar, right? Okay. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about with Pear Deck here, if your school does Nearpod instead, you could totally do it with Nearpod. But the way that I want to show it to you here, it's a little bit of a twist on the way that people do it a lot of times. So with that in mind, if you have a device, this could be a cell phone, iPad, laptop, Chromebook, whatever. Let's do one of these. There we go. All right, so if you've got your device out, go ahead and head to joinpd.com. Join, J-O-N-P-D. It's like PD, like Pear Deck. Joinpd.com. And the Pear Deck add-on isn't popping up. Let's try it again. Okay, so I asked for hands earlier about who's heard of Pear Deck. Let me ask this. How many of you are actually familiar with like what it does? Or have you, yeah, let's do that. Okay, hands down. How many of you actually used it in class? Okay, all right, several of you, very good. But then there's several of you that haven't, so we'll continue on in this. And this will be like another example of a way another teacher uses it. So that's all kind of interesting too, right? To see how other people are using the same stuff sometimes. So again, joinpd.com on your device, and it's going to give you a code in a moment. Hasn't done it yet. Sometimes people go to joinpd.com and they're like, excuse me, it's asking for a code. What's the code? And I'm like, I haven't given it to you yet. Just sit tight. There it is. WJWHD. Do any of the rest of you notice the clever little sentences that it makes out of the letters? I love that. I talk about that sometimes whenever I present on Pear Deck, and I'm like, see, Warm Jacks wish hilarious drums. Isn't that great? And everybody does this. I always think it cracks me up a little bit more than it cracks everybody else up. So, yeah. So again, one more time, if you're still kind of getting into this, we're going to go to joinpd.com, and then we're going to punch in this code right here, WJWHD. Ooh, we got a bunch of you in here already. This is good. Okay, so while the rest of you are kind of jumping into this, let me tell you what's about to happen. By the way, if you have a slide up here that says, how do you say, like a white slide on there that says, how do you say, you are in the right place. So, we're going to do a little activity, kind of the way I would do it with a class. I'll be the teacher, you'll be the students. And so, yeah, I'll just kind of run it as if we were in class. I don't want to give too much away. I think you guys will get a kick out of this. So, okay, so if you're still joining, that's okay. Okay, so let's do this activity real quick. So if I were the teacher starting this up, I would say, okay, class, have you ever noticed that sometimes when you travel to different cities and states within the United States, they pronounce the same word differently sometimes? You noticed this before? Or how about this? Sometimes they have two different words for the exact same thing. Wild, right? There's one example of this that immediately comes to mind, so I'm going to quiz all of you on it real quick. I want you to answer fast. Don't think about it. Don't overthink it. Just first thing that comes to mind, I want to hear your answer, okay? Here it comes. Ready? Pop or soda? Soda. Interesting. That was what? 85-15, would you say? Maybe even 90-10. Mostly soda. Okay, here's why I asked that. There was research done by this researcher, I think in North Carolina. And he gathered all of this data on how people say certain things in different locations, and he plotted it all on a map. So you can see exactly where everybody says different stuff, which is fascinating. And so the first map that I want to show you is the pop soda map. Actually, it's not just the pop soda map. It's the pop soda Coke soft drink. I think it's soft drink. I think that's the other one. Yeah. Map. So all four of them are on it. And of course with Pear Deck you can keep an eye on your screen if you want to, or you can look up here at the projector screen, either way. Okay? There's the map. Soda is red from Pittsburgh or around Pittsburgh. Put both hands up if you said pop and you're from Pittsburgh. Yeah, there's a bunch of you, aren't there? Okay, hands down. How many of you are from the other half of the state and said, okay, yep. Okay, 2 hands up if you're from the other side of the state and you said soda. It all bears out, doesn't it? That is really interesting. And then there's this green section. I have to be careful when I go to Texas and I show this slide. I'll go someplace and they'll be like, what kind of Coke do you want? And I'm like, Coke! There's Coke! They're like, no, you can have any kind of Coke you want. I'm like, I don't think you understand this. There's Coke. And I've just, yeah, okay, and wine. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I don't win those arguments very well. So, anyway. I'm still fascinated about where this big red blob is, but that's a conversation for another day. Okay, so what's interesting about this, of course, is that we can now play with this data a little bit because we've got these maps that we can work with. So, in a second, if you've never used Pear Deck or Nearpod or anything, what will happen on your device is that your screen will become interactive. And this one's going to be a drawing slide. So, let's flip to the next slide. There's going to be a word in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Hopefully, if it loads. There it is. Would you say that word out loud for me, please? Y'all. Y'all. Okay, so it's the word y'all as opposed to what? No, I heard all y'all. That is that's impressive word usage right there. That is like the plural collective, right? We're getting very deep on our y'all grammar here. Y'all as opposed to you all or yous. That's right, she would say yuns. You guys heard yuns before? Did you hear me just slip a you guys out there? That'll be telling. You're going to figure out here in a second. Okay, so here's what I'd like for you to do. Since you've got this slide up where you can draw, I would love for you to draw the border of the y'all zone. Where do you think the y'all zone is? Draw the border of it with your finger or use your touchpad or whatever it is that you got. Go ahead and draw in the border of the y'all zone. Give you about 10 seconds. Doesn't take very long, thankfully. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Of course, what's fun about Pear Deck, if you're not familiar with it, is that I can take all of your answers and I can put them up here on the screen. It will eliminate all of your names off of the screen. So if you can imagine if students are doing this and they want to respond, but they don't want their names to be up here, that would make them kind of nervous. So it'll put them up here anonymously, but through Pear Deck you can backtrack and you can see who's done what. I know some of you were thinking that question. With the anonymous answers, you're like, I need to know. So, okay, let's see your responses. Interesting. Like one little strip right there. St. Louis, Kansas City, and Topeka, and that's it. Okay. Southeast, Interesting. Okay, southeast, and all these people living in the Gulf of Mexico. Okay. Right. Okay, still very southeast, a little farther. Oh, nice, they colored this in. Interesting. We stopped short of Miami here. Okay. Very much southeast. Oh, and these guys added Miami though in a second. Okay, wow. Apparently Miami is a very contested y'all zone here. I didn't realize this. Okay. A little farther north. Interesting. I didn't expect that. Okay. South Texas.